Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
We can't generalize from this, but if Time Magazine wants to paint a picture that all college students are nothing but turned in on themselves, I think that that would be a faulty picture. It would be interesting for parents or for the population as a whole to come and observe the amount of peer ministry that goes on and volunteer service among students. It really is quite amazing.
Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talks with Dr. Norman Gadan, who is director of the University Counseling Center at the University of Toledo. Father Bacik and Dr. Gadan will discuss peer ministry and student formation. And now, here's Father Bacik.
Norm, I'm happy to have you on the program. You've been on this program quite a bit, not as many as some of my most favorite guests, but you are moving up in the ranks here, and so I'm pleased to have you again.
Thanks very much, Jim. And I come in whenever I'm invited. I don't know what else I can say.
Or when you have a book to sell.
Or when I have a book to sell.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why I'm here tonight.
I know that you're working on a self-help book, and you've asked me to do a chapter of it, and it's forced me to do a lot of thinking on the question of peer ministry among college students. And the whole idea of peer ministry, I think, today is an important one. I think we learned a lot from something like Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
Or in our Catholic circles, we have these divorce groups now, where people are ministering to others with similar problems, where there seems to be a certain empathy created among people as they share these different problems.
A lot of parallels, aren't there, in terms of compassion, empathy, feeling for others, the idea of service. And I know in the case of the Church, it goes much beyond service into a specific concept of peer ministry, but there really are a lot of similarities and a lot of parallels, and especially I think we see them as we look at the students who are in these peer ministry and peer counseling programs develop over time. In the mental health movement, there's a concept called the helper therapy principle, and this means in essence that by helping others, we help ourselves. I think an old truth that's, or old wine in a new bottle, maybe.
The technical term they use is
helper therapy principle. And it's been shown in a number of studies that students who help each other, students who are trained and selected and to help each other in a variety of contexts, counseling centers, mental health centers, career centers, student affairs offices, in a sense, the residence hall advisors and students who are trained to do academic advising are also peer counselors. Students in almost all of these contexts tend to grow and develop in some very nice ways as a product of serving and helping others, even though that may be very far from their mind when they decide to try it. They become more confident, more competent, more knowledgeable, and in many cases they keep replaying covertly their own questions, their own conflicts, in a sense helping themselves decide and work through perhaps conflicts that are similar to what they're working on with somebody else. And it's been, for us, one of the nice dividends is to see somebody profit from these experiences personally, and also maybe to get some ideas about their own career. Because most of our peer counselors in the counseling center at UT are not from counseling or psychology. They're from all kinds of fields: physics, chemistry, philosophy. And yet they have the personal traits and the motives and the desire to help, and they're very trainable and teachable and become very good peer counselors.
Tell me a little bit more about the selection process, or what ends up motivating them, and how do they end up getting into these peer counseling programs?
We use a variety of approaches. We always try and advertise on campus. We put ads in the campus newspaper. We put out flyers to try and make sure we're hitting our potential audience. Then we have a basic background questionnaire they fill out. Then there are interviews with the director of the program, and occasionally there are interviews with other people already aboard, peer counselors already in the program. And other places they do it a little bit differently. Some schools use personality tests as a kind of a selection device. Other schools use role-playing in which they may set up a mock situation in which the counselor has to deal with a very difficult and complicated situation, and they have people watch how they handle it and evaluate their performance in a sense. Reasoning if they're successful before training and have a good feel for how to handle difficult and complicated relationships, with training they'll be even better.
Now tell me a little bit about the training process that goes on with those people.
It usually has two major parts to it. A generic part, and this is, I think, is becoming pretty widespread around the country, not just in our own work here. A sort of generic part that focuses on communication skills. Skills of attending to someone else, listening to them, and here I'm talking about the very basics: eye contact, posture, gestures. Some people, maybe most of us, have certain things that we don't notice about ourselves that are very disruptive and disrupt communication. The way we move our hands, the way what we do with our eyes, or how we hold our body. So we try and work on things like that.
Would that be a sort of one-to-one thing where you would point out to a given student, like,
yes,
don't turn your back on someone else as they're talking to you,
yes,
or something?
Absolutely.
Or close your eyes.
Right. Or some of it we do in a group context. Some is one-to-one, some is a group. But then the skills, the level of skill development goes on to a higher stage, really, where someone learns how to paraphrase, maybe how to confront, really disagree with someone. How to make an interpretation. I'm not talking here about a deep psychoanalytic interpretation of historical motivation in one's early life, but an interpretation of something that may be pretty obvious to everybody else and maybe only a little bit obvious to you about yourself. And then there's a whole set of skills that have to do with integration, sort of pulling it all together and becoming a really well-rounded peer counselor.
Now, how much time do these peer counselors spend doing this?
Our own programs vary from 20 to 40 hours in training, much of it taking place in a week preceding, or of several weeks preceding the peer counselor actually beginning service. And then there are ongoing training and ongoing supervision seminars of 2 to 4 hours a week that go on, well, really during the course of the training.
Now, how do you set it up so that they have people to talk to and to deal with? How does that all happen?
You mean during the training period?
No, during the actual performance of their duties, then.
That, of course, depends on just which kind of peer counseling program they're going into. One program we have here is called Peer Career, and it's been very well received by students. Here, the students actually are operating an information center that has a lot of information in it about career planning, personal assessment, the world of work. We don't offer jobs, job seeking and job finding as our placement service does, but we stop short of that with trying to help somebody analyze themselves, understand themselves better, understand the world of work, and sort of put the two together in their own mind, and then try and relate that to their educational plans. Students run this operation for us under the direct supervision of Dr. Donald Sands, who's really the founder of this particular program. And so they're dealing with a clientele who actually come in, their fellow students, asking questions such as, I don't know what to major in. And furthermore, I don't have any idea what kind of job I ever want to get or what kind of career. We might put them on a computerized guidance program where they could begin to ask questions about themselves. We might give them some career interest inventories. We might simply turn them on to a lot of information and let them just immerse themselves in information about the world of work. In another program we have called Rap Support Plus, we train it's for older and adult students. Many of them have been married, some are divorced, some are returning to school. And here the students are trained primarily to run workshops and to run groups. We don't have, at the moment, a one-to-one counseling service. So their training is both in these generic communication skills, but also in the specific content of the workshop or group that they would be running. For instance, we have a series of groups on divorce and divorce recovery that we run quarterly at the university. And there the group leaders are trained both in counseling skills and in specific knowledge about divorce, its effects, recovery from it, how to work one's way out of it. Many of the people doing the groups have themselves been divorced, so they're not dealing with something that's some abstract bit of knowledge they've gotten from a book, but they're very personally conversant with it and have sort of resolved their own experience.
Now, that seems to be one of the real keys to making all of this work, isn't it? That they have gone through the experience, and the other people seem to know and to trust them that way. I'm thinking about a priest telling me who was working with people who had returned from Vietnam duty, veterans, and working with them for years and not being able to sort of break into the inner circle or even become a confidant for them.
Right.
That many of those men would talk only to other veterans.
Right.
And it's only with that other person who had shared that experience or knew what they were talking about or had been through it would they trust themselves. And I believe that that's the theory generally that's
that is
behind
the theory
so much
generally.
of this peer ministry that I'm concerned with. That other students are liable to listen to students who have been through a particular type of problem.
I know the chapter you're preparing for our book fits in so remarkably well today with the other chapters that are on innovative programs being done in universities throughout the country. The peer counseling had, up until the last few years, been more or less a counseling, psychological sort of help. It had tended to be found most often in the residence halls or in academic information centers or in academic advising. And one trend we make a lot out of in this new book is that it seems to be expanding directly into the fabric of the whole higher education process. We have a chapter, for example, on the paraprofessional training programs that exist in community colleges, the paramedical, paradental, paralegal programs. Some exist in community colleges. Some now exist in freestanding proprietary schools. Then we have a chapter on health services and health service education. There are remarkable developments going on in which alcohol education programs are run by students for students, in which self-help pain clinics have been designed and evolved with no medical or nursing help directly there, but with fellow students there to sort of guide someone through it. We have other work in this particular section of the book in which college students are trained to provide very unique tutoring to extremely high-risk dropouts in 18 New York City inner city high schools. And some remarkable results are really coming out of that program. And there are quite a few parallels with your peer ministry work, and I think also some important differences. I don't know if you feel like commenting.
Well, I think let me talk a bit and try to set some of this peer ministry idea into that framework. When we're talking about ministry, we're talking about people working out of a religious tradition and people committed to that tradition and trying in one way or another to draw on its resources to aid, help other human beings. And it's a religious motivation, and part of the content of what is conveyed is drawn from that religious tradition. Now, to make that much more concrete, I think that I see a number of ways that students are doing this out of their faith traditions. One, I am calling a peer ministry of formation, or more broadly put, maybe of teaching, a teaching kind of ministry. The prime example of that in my mind is one student who worked with me at the University of Toledo, and he gave, after he graduated from the university, he gave up a year of service, or gave a year of service to our university parish before he entered graduate school in the area of psychology. And during that year of service, he did a great book study with me. He went through the great philosophical works like Plato and Aristotle and Augustine and Aquinas, and into the modern period all the way up to Sartre and Heidegger and so on. Did about 12 great books like that, trying to relate it to his own Catholic heritage and the theology of a particular Catholic theologian by the name of Karl Rahner. Well, that was a very difficult study, and of course not all students would be ready to undertake such a thing. But through all of that, this young man was sort of forming himself in the faith, rooting himself in his Catholic heritage, becoming more conversant with the great conversation that's gone on philosophically and theologically throughout the history of the world, getting himself background and framework and perspective, which he then used and drew upon in doing a lot of other kind of ministries, peer ministries, reaching out to other students who were just about his own age. So out of that, I remember he was began a pizza party for the poor, as he called it, in which he gathered students to make pizzas to take to one of the food distribution centers in town. Growing out of, I think, of his understanding of our Judeo-Christian heritage of being of service to other people. And he, in turn, he also taught guitar to students, but always with a particular slant that there was this interest in the spiritual dimension of the religious meaning of the songs and of people perhaps moving into giving, using their talents that way as part of the worship service and so on. And he organized retreats, all kind of other things in which he then was taking what he had learned and trying to apply it to others and to other students, trying to enrich their own understanding of their heritage. And he didn't restrict that to Catholic students, but he was sort of available really to deal with students of all different backgrounds.
And your role then with this kind of a young man who, I guess, if I understand you right, is sort of an apprentice to the priests and to the nuns here, but still a student, and his role is primarily to work with other students. And your role as the priest here is what? How has that changed?
Well, I would say probably a facilitator or enabler. I think in this case I was very much the teacher, or maybe a better word would be the mentor. One who was knew a little bit about that tradition and wanted him to find out about it. I tried to guide his reading, and we would talk about what he was doing, and we would have general opportunities to discuss his whole ministry and how it fit into the theological learning he was doing. Eventually, he wrote a paper summarizing what he had done throughout the year, relating his studies to his personal growth, which was, I think, amazing, and also his efforts to serve others. So the role, I mean, I don't know if I know the right word. I think this is a rather unique case in a way, but it's I would be a mentor, a teacher, possibly a role model, although one doesn't want to jump in too quickly to say that. One hopes that students are always discriminating and pick out what might be virtuous and put aside what is not so virtuous. But anyway, it does have that character to it a little bit. I think students generally are looking for someone who, in a way, represents some ideal to them. Not totally, but some aspect that they like.
Where do students like this fit in with the conventional wisdom from Time and Newsweek and the newspapers today, that college students are the new Philistines, that all they care about are money and cars and personal security and jobs, and that they're not interested in intellectuality or spirituality, or their values are kind of maybe there is evidence in, as we look at thousands and thousands of students, there have been some changes in these measured values, but you're talking about you're not talking about that. You're talking about a different kind of student here.
That's right. We're talking about people of great generosity.
Really?
And people, when people give a year of service to a parish like that, they are taking, if they went into the job market, they're could be making $25,000 probably on an average, something like that, and they're giving a year before they go into graduate school. Those are
other
major
students like
commitments.
this? Is he unique?
Well, no, I happen to know one local university that has a position like that, and then last year they had 4 students apply for it, and they only could take one. So that there around the country, I think there is a great idealism like this. There's a lot of people who are looking to serve others. I think it is sort of a reaction to a hedonistic culture, as you described it, and there just are so many good people around. I mean, you can't generalize from this, but if Time magazine wants to paint a picture that all college students are nothing but turned in on themselves, I think that that would be a faulty picture. It would be interesting for parents or for the population as a whole to come and observe the amount of peer ministry that goes on and volunteer service among students. It really is quite amazing.
My own view of the from the lay side of the picture is very much the same. I think there's a tremendous amount of idealism and very strong values in college students I work with and observe. It does get disguised at times because of the pressures in the real world. Most students are very concerned about their educational plans, about their careers, about jobs, about what really happens to them afterwards, about whether to go to graduate school or not, or whether to take a job now or not, where to live in the country. There's just a lot of very difficult decisions, and they absorb a lot of time and energy and psychic energy, too. And they kind of preoccupy one to the extent that they cover up and I think don't let some of the idealism and spirituality, if you will, caring for each other, come out as much. But it's there.
I was at a convention of college students, Catholic college students from around the country, and there must have been close to 500 of them gathered for an annual convention. And it was amazing to see the commitment of these people and how almost all of them were involved in some sort of service project or some sort of peer ministry. They all thought of themselves as having a definite responsibility that way and a role to play, and they were enthusiastic about it. And these are good, solid young people, you know, not pietistic, religious fanatics or something, but just down-to-earth, ordinary kind of college students, but who clearly have drunk in some sort of spiritual dimension, who have that deeper sense of what life is all about, and that it knows something of the biblical truth that you have to lose your life to gain it. They have really found something like that. And a lot of them are involved in this whole formation ideas. When I use that word formation, Norm, I mean it in a broad sense of helping other people to grow, to deepen, to take on the best of one's religious characteristics or tradition, to really appropriate the faith, to become an integrated kind of person. So formation is a word used a lot in theological or religious education circles to indicate the development of the whole person. It has a strong, in my mind here, intellectual side. It has a component of knowledge, but it's not limited to that. So I think of this young man I was describing as being a good example. I mean, I was trying to help him drink in or enter into conversation with the great questions as they've been developed by the philosophers, but all the time it's in terms of him deepening and growing and appropriating the faith. Now, he in turn, for example, would help run retreats for other people and bring his knowledge to bear on that. He helped with a seminar on sexuality that was done for students, so that the bits of this knowledge
It's a wide range of experience here. Great books, working with other students, teaching guitar.
Well, the man is unusual, and one doesn't want to put that forward as the model for everybody. But the truth is that when I look around the country, and I've had a chance to get feedback from many students around the country, there are a whole lot of them that are involved broadly in this formation. A lot of it goes on with the retreat work, the retreat movement, where, like our students, for example, about 10 or 20 of them will get together and plan a weekend retreat. And they meet regularly, and they kit a theme, and they work out how they're going to do it, and they each have their own roles to play, and they go out and try to recruit other students to go on the retreat. Sometimes they even have more leaders than followers in these cases. But what happens is the formation team develops a certain coherence. They become closer together. They have a chance to probe their own faith questions as they develop this. And then they give some of the talks on the weekend. And then this whole movement spreads. And people who make the retreat then can become people who will give the next retreat, become the leaders. So it is a whole snowball effect here. Now that's one that would be a good example of what this formation is all about. And the students will say that, boy, on those retreats it's great because I can talk, I can be myself, I can share problems. I find out other people got problems similar to my own. It's a marvelous experience.
You know, there's a very close analog to this in the lay world, and it goes by various names: student-to-student teaching, small study groups that have been organized by faculty as either a formal part of a course or students organizing themselves for a teaching and learning experience. And Professor Joseph Katz of the State University of New York at Stony Brook is writing a chapter on this phenomena, and it seems to be a growing one for our book. And I was wondering, as I hear you talk, how your work and how your view of the formation process done within the framework of a peer ministry program might be similar to, and especially how it may differ from students gathering around great books themselves in small groups, or really be in some other way becoming less dependent on the instructor, the teacher, the faculty member, and doing more for themselves academically and intellectually. May differ from it.
Okay, well, I think, first of all, I do see a lot of the similarities. The dynamics seem to be clearly the same. That is, students are forced to deepen their own perception of something. They begin to share it with others. Others benefit from it. I can see the dynamics being similar. Again, I think that perhaps when you turn to the question of content and slant and perspective on it all is where you will see something distinctive. So if they have that retreat and during it they're talking about sexuality, well, they're going to talk about it not simply from the viewpoint of what is generally available in the culture, but hopefully drawing on the long Judeo-Christian tradition out of which they are working, in which they try to see sexuality and its goodness as found in the biblical accounts, and with also its dark forces involved, and so that they would be drawing on their tradition as they look at these questions. Not only that, I think, but there would be a time when the explicit content would be shared, when one would begin to talk about one's Catholic faith and the importance of the sacramental life, for example, of the worship and so on, and that would be what comes out in sharing with others. So there's not only a perspective that's different, that's shaped by the long religious heritage, but also a content that they need to know. That's why one of the great things needed for the peer ministers who are involved in formation is a knowledge of the faith. And I must say it's one of the things that we've done most poorly. But if we're going to train peer ministers at our place, not only do I want you to give them communication skills, but I want my time to talk to them about the content of our particular theological tradition. And I believe there you begin to see some of the differences that we might find in these programs.
Are these peer ministers, particularly these that would be out of this tradition of formation, are they widely accepted? Are the concepts widely accepted in the church today?
Yes, I think indeed they are. There's a growing interest in doing this. There's a realization that the clergy cannot do it all. Very frankly, it's pragmatic. We need to multiply the ministers in order to make it work, but it's also the more effective way of doing it. Yeah, I think there is a general acceptance, and there's the understanding that this is what we need. We need, from our perspective, a church made up of people who form a community of ministers, where everyone realizes they have responsibilities, and it's great to be teaching our young people this.
You've been listening to Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Today, Father Bacik talked with Dr. Norman Gadan, who is director of the University Counseling Center at the University of Toledo. The topic of this week's Reflections was peer ministry and student formation. If you have any comments on today's show or suggestions for future programs, please write Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Minister, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio, 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Commission of the Diocese of Toledo.